There's a moment you know is coming. The percentage drops below 20. You find a cable. You plug it in. The ritual is so automatic, you could do it unconsciously. Inside that sealed case, something violent is being barely contained. Two materials that want to react, separated by layers thinner than a strand of hair. Between them, a liquid that would ignite on contact with water. You carry this in your pocket. You sleep with it next to your head. You've never thought twice about it. The energy density is extraordinary, which is another way of saying the consequences of failure are too. These are defects, they're reminders. The chemistry you rely on every day exists in a state of managed danger, and the person who figured out how to make this chemistry work at all died last year without most people knowing his name. By 1970, electronics were getting smaller. Transistors were replacing vacuum tubes. Circuit boards were shrinking. Devices were becoming portable, but the batteries weren't keeping up. Nickel-cadmium cells were heavy, lead acid even worse. The ratio of weight to stored energy was terrible. You could miniaturize the electronics, but the battery stayed bulky. The bottleneck wasn't the technology, it was the chemistry. If you wanted more energy storage, you needed a material with high electrochemical potential, something light, something that could give up electrons easily. On the periodic table, there's one element that fits perfectly: lithium, the lightest metal, the most electropositive. In theory, a lithium-based battery could store 3 times the energy of nickel-cadmium per unit weight. But there was a problem. Lithium is violently reactive. It reacts with water. It reacts with air. When used as a battery electrode, it forms dendrites, tiny metallic fingers that grow during charging, eventually puncturing the separator and short-circuiting the cell. When that happens, all the stored energy releases at once. By 1970, most researchers had concluded lithium batteries were too dangerous, too unstable. Most people, but not everyone. In 1972, Exxon hired a British chemist named Stanley Whittingham, not to work on oil, to work on batteries. This seems strange now. Exxon was an oil company. But in the early 1970s, energy companies were nervous. The 1973 oil embargo was coming. Suddenly, diversification looked smart. Exxon created an energy storage division. They recruited researchers from top universities. Whittingham had just finished his PhD at Oxford. His specialty was intercalation chemistry. Intercalation is the reversible insertion of ions into layered crystal structures. Keep that term in mind. It becomes the key to everything. Intercalation compounds are materials with a structure like a deck of cards, layers stacked with gaps between them. Small ions can slide into those gaps without destroying the structure. Whittingham had been studying materials that did this with lithium ions, and he'd found something interesting. Titanium disulfide, it forms sheets, natural spaces between them, and lithium ions fit perfectly in those spaces. You could insert lithium during charging, remove it during discharge. The structure stayed intact, reversible, repeatable. This was the cathode Whittingham needed. For the anode, he used thin lithium metal, and between them, he used something no one had tried before: a liquid electrolyte, not water, an organic solvent with lithium salt dissolved in it. This was dangerous. Organic solvents are flammable, but they don't react with lithium the way water does. The lithium ions could move through the liquid, from cathode to anode during charging, from anode to cathode during discharge. In 1976, Whittingham filed the patent, the world's first rechargeable lithium battery. Exxon built prototypes. For a moment, it looked like Exxon might pivot from fossil fuels to energy storage, but the battery had a problem: dendrites. Even with Whittingham's design, they still formed, slowly, over dozens of charge cycles. Eventually, they puncture the separator. In 1982, the project was shut down. Stanley Whittingham's battery was shelved. The patents owned by Exxon, not by Whittingham, sat unused. Another dead end. Or so it seemed. In Japan, engineers were watching. Sony was building the Walkman. Camcorders, portable CD players. Every product needed better batteries. They'd been following Whittingham's work, but they'd also seen the dendrite problem. A researcher named Akira Yoshino took a different approach. What if you eliminated metallic lithium entirely? Yoshino replaced the lithium metal anode with petroleum coca carbon-based material. Lithium ions could still intercalate into the carbon structure, but there was no metallic lithium to form dendrites. For the cathode, he used lithium cobalt oxide. This compound had been discovered by another researcher, John Goodenough. Yes, that was his real name. He'd found that lithium cobalt oxide could reversibly host lithium ions with much higher voltage than titanium disulfide. Yoshino combined Goodenough's cathode with his carbon anode. He kept Whittingham's liquid electrolyte, the same basic chemistry. And in 1985, he had a working prototype. No dendrites, no fires, stable cycling. Sony commercialized it in 1991. The same chemistry refined, but fundamentally the same that's in your phone right now. Today, there are more than 15 billion lithium-ion cells in circulation. The global market exceeds $60 billion annually. They're in everything portable, everything rechargeable, and inside every single one of them is that liquid, the electrolyte. It's still based on Whittingham's formulation from 1976, lithium hexafluorophosphate dissolved in a mixture of organic carbonates. Different manufacturers tweak the ratios, but the fundamental approach hasn't changed because it works. When you plug in your phone, lithium ions flow through that liquid from the cathode to the anode during charging, from the anode back to the cathode during use. The electrolyte is the medium, the messenger. Without it, the ions wouldn't move, the battery wouldn't function. But here's the part most people don't know. That liquid is toxic. Lithium hexafluorophosphate reacts with moisture to produce hydrofluoric acid. The organic carbonates are flammable. When a lithium-ion battery fails, the electrolyte decomposes. It releases flammable gases. Pressure builds. The cell ruptures. The fire is difficult to extinguish. Water makes it worse. This isn't a defect. It's the chemistry. The same properties that make the electrolyte effective also make it dangerous. You trust that the engineering is good enough, that the separator won't fail, that the battery management system will prevent overheating. Usually it does, but not always. In 2016, Samsung recalled 2.5 million Galaxy Note 7 phones. The batteries were catching fire. The problem wasn't the electrolyte chemistry itself. It was a manufacturing defect. The separator was too thin in some cells, more energy density, less safety margin. The recall cost Samsung over $5 billion. But this wasn't a failure of the technology. It was a reminder that the technology operates within narrow tolerances. You're carrying controlled danger every day. And it works because thousands of engineers have spent decades optimizing every detail. Lithium-ion batteries aren't safe because the chemistry is safe. They're safe because the engineering contains the chemistry. In 2019, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry went to 3 people: John Goodenough, Akira Yoshino, and Stanley Whittingham. Whittingham was 77 years old. He'd been teaching at Binghamton University in New York. When asked how it felt to win 43 years after his original patent, he said, "I didn't expect it. It's been a long time." He died in June 2024. Most people didn't notice, but every phone charged that day used his chemistry. The battery revolution Whittingham enabled reshaped the global economy. Lithium is now a strategic resource. The Atacama Desert holds some of the world's largest lithium reserves. Extraction is water-intensive. Brine is pumped from underground aquifers into massive evaporation ponds. Indigenous communities report water shortages. Agricultural land is drying. The electrolyte in your phone depends on this. This isn't Whittingham's fault, but it's part of his legacy. Every technology contains contradictions. Researchers are now trying to eliminate the liquid entirely. Solid-state batteries. Instead of a flammable liquid, they use a solid ceramic or polymer. In theory, they could be safer. They could also store more energy. Toyota plans to commercialize solid-state batteries by 2027. If they succeed, liquid electrolytes may become obsolete. Which raises a question: how long does a foundational technology last? The liquid electrolyte has been in use since 1991, more than 3 decades. At some point, something better arrives. The old technology fades. For now, though, every time you plug in, Whittingham's chemistry is there. Between the electrodes, in the liquid you never see, carrying lithium ions back and forth. You don't think about the electrolyte. You don't think about the separator. You don't think about the supply chains or the occasional fires. You just plug it in. Because it works. And the fact that it works billions of times per day is the result of decades of research by people whose names you've never heard. They solved a problem everyone said was impossible. They made lithium safe enough to carry in your pocket. They invented the invisible thing that made the modern world portable. And most of the time, you never even notice it's there.